Broadcasting from the studios of WKEN, where every day it's the weekend. It's the Ken Calvert Show with your host, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Ken Calvert Show podcast. Coming to you live from the casual studios of WKEN, where every day it's the weekend. By the way, if you wouldn't mind, would you hit me with a like on Facebook on the Ken Calvert Show fan page? Just go up there to the left on Facebook, the search bar, and type in the Ken Calvert Show. Nice, there you go. See it? Yep, there we go. All right, I post every day, sort of do a on this date classic rock memories post, or a number of posts actually. And I would also ask you to subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes, add it to your Alexa skill. We're up on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart as well, and thank you in advance. And finally, I spend a lot of time on Twitter, probably too much time on Twitter, but my handle there is at Ken Calvert Show, at Ken Calvert Show. I was thinking about this before I started recording this morning. I was grousing once again in my head about streaming music, and the reason why I bring that up is because of the fact that podcasts would be much cooler if we could play music, but we can't. Oh, we could, but we would have to pay for the rights to the publishing, to the record company. It goes on ad nauseum, and so I can't afford it. I just simply can't afford it. For example, today we're going to talk about the real story behind the Guess Who's American Woman interview I did with Burton Cummings. Great interview. You're going to find it fascinating. But my point is simply this, that I guess I am the get off your lawn guy because of the fact that it's just so difficult. It would be so cool for me to be able to play the song American Woman, or go back to the song, or a various track or a portion of the song, so that we could make the point during the interview. Reference points, if you will. But we can't. I guess I could if I could afford it. But all of a sudden, later in life, I've got this real thorn in my craw about streaming music, and I've been, like I told you before, and I'm not going to go on stop. Can't do it. I'd love to play music, can't afford it. Coming up today, I do have that interview with Burton Cummings from the Guess Who about that song. On May 9th, not that long ago, May 9th, 1970, Guess Who started a 3-week run at number one on the U.S. singles chart with American Woman, the group's 6th top 30 hit. But it was their only number one. You know, you think about it, you compare everything to the Beatles or the Rolling Stones when it comes to number ones, or at least I do. The song was born by accident, according to one article I read. The song was born by accident when guitarist Randy Bachman was playing a heavy riff on stage after he broke a string. The other members joined in on the jam. A fan in the audience who had recorded the gig on a tape recorder presented it to the group after the show, and they developed it into a full song. It's not what happens in the interview you're about to hear. Based on what I hear, or not hear, I believe that's not exactly what happened. It's a great story that Burton's going to tell you, but he makes no reference whatsoever about the, quote, fan in the audience with a tape of the gig, end quote. Now, I would have bet you $5 that These Eyes also reached number one for the Guess Who, but I would be wrong. These Eyes only reached number 6. I remember at W4 we played a ton, and I mean a lot. We played a lot of Guess Who, that is, and the one song I never really understood, remember this one? Clap for the Wolfman? It's kind of a bizarre song. It did pretty well. According to the website songfacts.com, tough one to say, Burton Cummings explained that the song began as a jam and was originally called Clap for Napoleon. As they were appearing on NBC's Midnight Special a few times back in 1973, and they hosted the show in 1974, they changed the lyric as a tribute to the host, the late Wolfman Jack. It would become a breakthrough success for the group, and it was their first single to reach the top 10 on Billboard's chart, peaking again at number 6. Guess Who had a ton of early hits like Shakin' All Over. I love that song. Hand Me Down World, No Sugar Tonight, Laughin', Share the Land, No Time, Undone. I would have thought that could have been number one, too. She's Come Undone, and many, many more. I say this a lot, and I'm guilty of doing that, and I apologize, but Burton Cummings, once again, would have a seat at my table. Good guy, great storyteller and talker. So many artists for so long got into that short, quick answer that sounded like they didn't want to do the interview. They just were too busy to be sitting down with a disc jockey talking about their new album. Well, guess what? I wanted to scream into the microphone, hey, dude, you wanted to do this interview to help sell your new album or sell concert seats. So work with me here. Be a nice guy, and I'll be a nice guy back, all right? So let's enjoy my guest, Burton Cummings. I'm kind of grumpy on a Saturday morning, aren't I? I apologize. But I got things to do today, okay? I got to get out there and cut the lawn. Cross-cutting. I think I'm going to cross-cut it today. Just call me Cross-Cutting Ken. Where the hell have you been? That's what my lawn's saying right now. Have a great day, everybody. See you real soon. Congratulations to Burton Cummings. The release of Above the Ground, as my father always used to say, it's a good day if you start above the ground. I don't know what the genesis of the title is, but maybe I'll find out right now.
It's exactly that, what you just said. That's a particularly popular phrase with older people. Every day above the ground is a good day. And, I'm in my 60s now. I just turned 62 last birthday. I'm still feeling pretty good, pretty healthy. I've been doing a lot of live shows out on the road, still hitting my notes, still feeling pretty good. So I'm more or less, it's just about an attitude of gratitude for me, really. I've had over 30 albums between Guess Who and solo and compilations, 30 album releases, and I'm still here. I'm still hammering away at it. So that's really the genesis of that whole outlook, a good day above the ground. And, I've lost a lot of peers. I've seen a lot of heroes come and go. Even guys that I've played with. Kurt Winter is gone. Dominic Troiano is gone. Two guys from the Guess Who, It's just it. Basically what you said. A good day above the ground.
I have so many questions to ask you about, but it all started with Shakin' All Over, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the band sort of made a turn from that. I still consider that to be one of the great all-time rock and roll songs.
I didn't sing Shakin' All Over. That was Chad Allen, and they did very well with that before I was ever in the Guess Who. It was a cover of a British song by Johnny Kidd and the Pirates.
Wow.
And it was a big, big record by Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. We're talking definitely pre-Beatles. Maybe 59, 60, 61, somewhere around there, I think. And the guys covered it. Guess Who covered it? And it became huge for them. And they toured the States. They toured with people like Dion and Chuck Jackson and Maxine Brown, I think the Kingsmen and the Turtles and Paul Revere and the Raiders. But then after that, they never really followed it up with Chad Allen on lead vocals. And the next really big one, by then I was there, and that was These Eyes.
Oh, and that's what I was going to ask you about, because living here in Detroit, and of course, in a weird way, we have such a strong connection with Windsor and Canada.
Oh, sure,
Sarnia.
it's right across the river.
Absolutely, and the powerhouse radio station CKLW and Rosalie Trombley.
Rosalie, bless her heart, that's the record that changed our lives.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. She is partially responsible for the person that was so into that song, adding that song, and getting the momentum behind that song.
Rosalie is partially responsible for my being on the phone with you right now this morning. I think, ultimately, that's where the record began to break, first and foremost, from Windsor across into Detroit. And then in San Francisco a little later, and then, it spread from there. But it didn't happen overnight. These Eyes was a slow start, but then all of a sudden, wow, man. And, as I think back on that, radio was still pretty segregated in '69, and Junior Walker and the All-Stars recorded These Eyes.
Yes,
the same
they did.
year, same year we did, and they had a hit with it on Motown. Even his version went top 20 in Billboard. same year as ours. So what a huge song for Randy and me. We wrote that in about half an hour.
That's always one of the questions that I have Burton Cummings as my guest, and of course it's not really a new CD because of the fact that it was released in Canada, I believe, earlier.
About a year ago.
Yeah, and now released in the States and available not only as CD, but as so many of the artists now do, a CD along with the DVD. The DVD captures what was going on in the studio.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a pretty good look at the making of the record. I hadn't watched the DVD for a while. For maybe 6 months I hadn't seen it, and now that the record officially came out in the States, I watched it again the other night. It really is funny, but yet there's moments that show how difficult making a record can be. A lot of people that aren't musicians, they figure you just you jump in a car, drive to the studio, go in, plug in, tune up, and play and sing and go home. I think what this DVD, it takes you into the studio and shows you the uphill battles sometimes and how you get to what seems like banging your head against a brick wall. It's just so difficult sometimes to get what you want. I think she captured all that. Lil Serafian, our videographer, I think she captured all that pretty well.
When I think about that, though, so many bands now, how do I say this? Some of the bands, there was a period of time where the bands were just basically kind of looking for almost a garage sound.
Yeah.
They would simply go in and go, okay, let's go. Let's not separate the vocals. Let's go with at least half the instruments and the vocals.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden put a final mix on it, boom, put a bow on it, put it on the CD, and off it goes.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of gone back to spending a little more time with the production and the engineering. Am I right?
I made this record the way we used to in the old days. I mean, it didn't take forever, but I certainly didn't use a lot of the toys that they use now. There's, geez, man, anybody can make a record and put it in tune. You can just use auto pitch control, and you can take out bad notes on instruments. The computers really have left all that wide open. We didn't use any of that stuff, not really. I'm kind of proud that the album is what I would call fairly organic, and that is we tried to lean away from the machines as much. I still, my favorite vision to conjure up after all these years of seeing live shows and music is I used to love 4 or 5 guys standing in a semicircle on stage, sweating, grooving together, just grooving off each other, and that to me was always the ultimate. And I think in many ways that we captured some of that on this record.
Yeah, but if I were Burton Cummings and as a radio announcer, I'm such a hypercritic. I constantly want to say, either let me do it again or I wish I could do it again. That's why I could never do what you do.
It's like kids growing up. You got to let them go. And especially if you're producing and writing and singing the way I do, when you wear all those hats, it very much sometimes it's a real battle to know when you want to let it go. There's always, while you're doing final mixes, you can always fix one more thing. And then, maybe tomorrow I'll get that before I let it go to the record company, let it go to the public. Comes a day when you hear all the mixes, and especially on this new album of mine, there's 19 tracks. Mm-hmm. So back in the days of vinyl, this definitely would have been a double album,
Absolutely.
4 sides.
Yeah, I thought about that. I did think about that, yeah.
So we crammed all we could get on one disc, which is about 78 minutes. So it's pretty good. And, it's a bit of a milestone for me, too, because in all the releases I've had, which is about 30 albums, more than that, considering compilations and everything, in all those releases, this is the first time ever that I've written all the songs myself without any co-writer. So it's a milestone for me.
Well, let me ask you this, Burton Cummings. Have you ever found yourself writing a song that you've actually kind of written before?
I think there's a danger of that anytime with anybody that continues on. Not only your own stuff, but there's a danger of plagiarizing, too,
Yeah.
that these things creep in to your mentality. More often than stealing from myself, I have found myself rewriting something that, that was David Crosby, or that was John Lennon, or that was Paul Simon. I found myself doing that. But fortunately, I'm a bit of a musicologist, And I usually always catch myself because I have a huge database. I have like 110,000 tracks in my library.
Wow. Here's a quick question for you. Fastest of the hits, okay, and there are so many for the Guess Who, and of course you personally as Burton Cummings. Of the hits, the shortest one it took to write, and then I'll follow up with which one took the longest to write.
As far as the shortest, Randy and I wrote these eyes in about half an hour. We each had pieces, and we just stuck them together. American Woman was kind of jammed on stage, and we ended up getting a cassette tape of that jam and kind of learning it from there. That one was kind of made up on the spot. There was a song of mine, especially in Canada. It was very, very much played on the radio called Break It to Them Gently. Mm-hmm. I wrote that in about 15 or 20 minutes after watching an old Kojak episode one time. So you never, first of all, something, you never know where the songs are going to originate, what's going to inspire you, what's going to fuel you to write a tune. And you never really know how long it's going to take. With me, I've never belabored them. I've never worked more than maybe a couple of nights, 2 or 3 nights, different nights in a row on a song. And if it's not happening by then, I'll just move on to something else. I don't like keeping pieces around for a long time and working on them.
Burton Cummings, you brought up a good point, and I guess I feel like I'm dancing on the head of a pin when I ask you about American Woman. A huge record, but were you angry at something that happened here in America?
Absolutely not. The funny thing was that song occurred after we had toured a lot in the States on the strength of our first singles. These Eyes and No Time and Laughing, some of those songs. And I always looked out at the crowds, and I thought that the American girls grew up faster. Mm-hmm. They looked older at a younger age. When we got back to Canada, it looked like they were younger and they weren't as fast or as slick or whatever I'm trying to say, and I don't mean this to be detrimental. So rather than, it wasn't so much an anti-American song as a pro-Canadian song. I was actually kind of, when I was making all that stuff up, right there on stage, I was kind of thinking more along the lines of Canadian Woman, I Prefer You, but out it came as American Woman, Stay Away From Me. Yeah. And the thing is, too, in 1970, when that came out, Vietnam War was at a very bad point of escalation. And I think the American people embraced that song. Rather than taking it as a slam, mm-hmm. I think they embraced it. A lot of people compared the American Woman to the Statue of Liberty, which was never my intention at all.
Wow, you know what? I never drew that metaphor either at all. But
you can see,
sure
see how it could be drawn.
Sure, absolutely.
Oh yeah. And it was an unbelievable time. I remember how Creedence Clearwater just dominated the airwaves of that era.
There are so many of the songs on the new album Above the Ground that I absolutely am crazy about. One of which I want to strangle you because it's become like an anthem for me. I can't get it out of my head. Get Out of Our Way. We just came from the USA.
Oh yeah.
I love that song.
We did that in Canada live a lot, and man, I'll tell you, the Bic lighters and the arms went up in the air.
I'll let you go. I gotta say congratulations on a fabulous release. I'm sorry it took so many years. 20 years is a long time to wait for some new material from Burton Cummings. I hope it doesn't take that long. I hope this has inspired you and sort of refreshed you. By the way, I don't know what you're doing, but you look great.
And thank you.
The artwork.
I think the thing. Somebody asked me that last week. They got their first copy of the album and they watched some of the DVD and they heard some of the songs. They said, "Hey man, you look and sound like the guy I grew up with." And they said, what is your secret? What are you doing? My reply to that, is I think the aging process treats you kind of on the level of how much you enjoy your life and your career. If you're happy with what you're doing, you're going to age better physically, I think. Wow. I think you wear that. You kind of wear that. If you're unhappy, you wear that too. I know some very wealthy people that look like hell. They may have all the money in the world, but they really don't enjoy what they have to do every day to keep that wealth. Me, I was one of the lucky ones that got in a band when I was a kid, ended up getting gold records by the time I was 20 and 21, and never had to go back to school and do something else. I've always been a musician. So maybe that's got something to do with it. You know, I still feel like that 17-year-old setting out to cut records.
Well, you sound a lot like yours truly, Ken Calvert, and unfortunately, I can do nothing about the DNA that one inherits when it comes to the hair. There's still enough, but there's not plenty. But there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. I love my job, opportunities like these to talk to Burton Cummings. Final question, and a selfish one, and I'm going to go back to Creedence. The song on the album, is it T-Pos, T-P-O-S?
Oh, yeah.
Is that, am I getting a little John Fogerty from that?
It stands for the Pissed Off Song.
Okay.
But I didn't want to put that in print. Not that it offended anybody. I just thought maybe I'll leave the letters, and when people ask me, that's what it is. But it's kind of what I call walking the fine line between country and rock. And Creedence did that, and the Lovin' Spoonful did that, and so did the Buffalo Springfield. Probably most prominently, the Buffalo Springfield were the first band I remember that walked that line between country and rock.
Yeah.
I think what this cut does that, I could hear, Dwight Yoakam singing along with me on that. I could hear some of the great voices of country kind of singing along with me. It's one of those, I think it's like a line dance song. A line dance song with plenty of drums right in your face, like the Beatles used to do.
Bob Seger, Detroit's own Bob Seger, I was so happy when he did Who Wants to Go to Fire Lake.
Oh, he's tremendous.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known Bob forever. We did a show together, believe it or not, way back in Milwaukee in about 1969. Seeger, the Guess Who, and the Monkees.
Oh, wow.
Oh, and Tommy James and the Shondells, I think, on the same show too that day. But this was way back around Tales of Lucy Blue time, around Ramblin' Gamblin' Man and 2 Plus 2 is on my mind. That's how far back it was.
And I was going to say, you probably got a little Crimson and Clover.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It was like, and Bob has always been very kind in the interviews when he's talked about me and especially about Randy and myself. Bob has been, we've known each other a long time. Our same producer, Jack Richardson, that did all our records, he did Night Moves, too.
Jack did a lot of Alice Cooper.
He did all the Alice Cooper, the big stuff. A lot of that was done in Toronto. People don't realize.
Well, Burton, you have been a joy to talk with, and please don't lose the number, and let us know if there's anything else we can do. Let me just mention one more time, Above the Ground, it's out now, Burton Cummings, new CD. It's been 20 years, and it is well worth the purchase and the listen because it's got a little bit of everything going on.
Wow.
Including one that almost reminded me a little bit of College Glee Club to it.
Oh, Rollaway.
Yeah, Rollaway.
Oh, just a silly little song about a rollaway bed. There's never been a song about a rollaway bed. Well, now we've got one.
Murphy's got nothing on you.
Absolutely.
All right, Burton Cummings.
Thank you, my man. Be well and take care.
All right, well, tell everybody in Canada right now that you say hello.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Burton Cummings.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
You can subscribe to the Ken Calvert Show podcast on Apple iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. It's also available by going directly to www.thekencalvertshow.com. You can reach Ken at kencalvertpodcast@gmail.com. The preceding program is the property of Ken Calvert and may not be rebroadcast without the written permission of Ken Calvert.